Yo, what up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. For those of you that have joined us many times before, once before, you know what I mean? Much love to each and every one of you supporters out there in the lovely world of the internet. This is where we get into the entire multiverse of pop culture. Before we move forward, we want to make sure to welcome all you new watchers and all you new viewers. Welcome. We get into all kinds of stuff. And we were not going to end the month of March out with the premiere of Scream 6 without getting into one of the most important elements of the Scream franchise. We're going to rank all the Ghostface killers from Scream to Scream 6 and all in between. Spoilers abound ahead for Scream 6 and the entire franchise, so if you don't want to know a single thing, if for some reason you're late to a damn near 30-year-old franchise, that is on you. And if you haven't had a chance to check out the latest installment, Scream 6, get out there to your local multiplex, theater, art house, whatever the hell you want to call it, whatever the hell you got near you. Drive out a couple hours if you have to. Go and check out Scream 6. It's fucking awesome. But with no further ado, let's get into my personal ranking of the Ghostface killers from my least favorite to my most favorite. I enjoy all of these characters to a varying degree. At least most of them, I would say maybe one or two aren't necessarily that great. But overall, I really do enjoy all these characters, and a few of the Ghostface killers in particular I absolutely love and are some of my favorite characters in the horror genre itself. So, with no further ado, let's get into this thing right here. And we're going to kick it off with number 13. That's right, 13. I'm not going to count his counterpart in Scream 6 because we only saw him chopped up in a refrigerator. So literally we didn't see this guy do absolutely anything. So I'm going to go with the main other accomplice that we did see actually reveal himself in the Ghostface costume and caught himself a body, that being the great Samara Weaving's character of Laura, the slasher professor herself, 21st century slashers, y'all. And I'm talking about Tony Revolori's character of Jason Carver. That's right. I'm talking about Jason Carver, man. And this character overall I thought was pretty entertaining. And I did dig Tony Revolori's performance overall. My only issue really was that he wasn't in the movie for that long, obviously, you know what I mean? He didn't impact the overall plot too much, you know what I'm saying? And there is some ties and some things with him being involved with the whole Richie thing going on in Scream 5, with him trying to finish Richie's movie, which does tie very well into this movie as well. And I do wonder if he was in contact with Amber and Richie on the Reddit thread, or however the hell they met in the psycho part of the Reddit threads online, or whatever, however the hell they explain it. But I'm not exactly sure if he was actually cool with Richie or Detective Bailey was using that against them and kind of let them have the lair. I'm not sure if he was necessarily even went to the lair that they have, the whole shrine room and whatnot. Not sure, but I did dig his performance overall, and I love the way that they showed him come through, kill Laura in the beginning of the film of Scream 6, and then reveal himself. And at first I was like, what? Are we gonna, as the audience, gonna know who the actual Ghostface killer is, or one of the killers, while the actual main characters don't for the entire runtime? That's insane. But it didn't turn out to be that, so unfortunately, I jumped the gun there. But overall, I dug the performance of Tony Revolori's character as Jason Carver and everything like that. The motivation wasn't necessarily anything, refreshing or new to the franchise, kind of tying into the previous film, but I definitely like the way that they were able to tie that in so seamlessly in with the previous film in this one, and making it feel like a straight up continuation and not this weird like delayed sequel or something that feels like it doesn't, it just feels organic to the way that things were set up with the previous Ghostface killers and all that stuff. And I like the way that they're weaving this tapestry of kind of this new trilogy or series, if you will, and everything kind of ties together, and everything's kind of an overarching narrative that goes from each film to the next even more definitively than it did in the original trilogy or quadrilogy of Scream, however you want to look at it. So yeah, but gotta throw him in at number 13. Number 12 is going to be, in my personal opinion, I was almost going to put him at 13, but since he did have more to do in the movie, he did have a little bit more meat to chew on. I don't think the actor was necessarily bad either. I just thought his performance and the overall killer motivation was a little cliche, something we've seen before, which goes with some of these other Ghostface killers, especially these ones of Scream 6. And I'm talking about Jack Champion's character of Ethan Landry. I wasn't necessarily loving this character. I thought he was very one note, been there, done that. Nothing really special or no real spark to his performance, to the character. He was very, very bland to me. And in my personal opinion, is one of the most bland characters in the entire Scream franchise. Honestly, man. He is so forgettable. I don't really remember any other lines that he had in the entire film other than one, which was I always wanted to stick it. I always wanted to stick something in you, Tara. Kind of getting a little bit of a Stu Mocker callback, but kind of something fresh and something a little more relevant to the character, because he probably was attracted to Tara Carpenter. Because come on, if she looked like Jenna Ortega, she does. Who would not be attracted to that? But overall, didn't really dig this character that much. I thought it was very, very bland. I don't even think him as the reveal of him being the killer was all that surprising. I had suspected him from the very first beginning moment of the like almost instantly from getting introduced to the guy, almost instantly. Not instantly, literally, but pretty damn close to almost the second or third time I seen him on screen. I was like, I think this guy's the killer, because literally every time someone would get attacked and or killed, this fucker would pop up or be nowhere to be accounted for during the whole process. Like, it is crazy, man. Like, overall, didn't really dig this character. Thought it was very bland. The most boring Ghostface Killer by a mile. Definitely got to throw him down in number 12. Now, as it comes for number 11, I did enjoy this character quite a bit more than the previous one, but overall, as a Ghostface Killer, still a little bit on the bland side. Didn't have like a definitive, real motivation that felt palpable and felt not necessarily realistic, but just felt like something you could latch onto and had a little more depth and a little more substance to it, and just made overall more logical sense and tied into something thematically with the story. Any of those details, any of those aspects, this character did not line up with that, and I'm talking about Charlie Walker's character, played by one of the talented Culkin brothers himself, Kieran Culkin, you know what I'm saying? And I dug his performance. I thought the character was pretty fun, you know, him and his boy over there with the crazy facial expression. Worst shot ever, that guy. Those two were kind of like the new surrogate Randy characters for the news film back when Scream 4 was the latest installment in 2011. And while I did enjoy his performance, I dug his role in the film. I did suspect him quite a bit as well, but I did have my doubts a little bit here and there. But I was pretty sure if there was going to be more than one killer, if they were going to get back to the basics and get back to the more normal formula of the Scream franchise, especially after Scream 3 didn't really hit as hard and definitely was a very, very big step down for the franchise. I thought they did a great job in Scream 4 of introducing some new characters that were very interesting and engaging, like Kirby Reed, and Charlie Walker was one of those. I definitely dug the character overall. I would just say out of the other cast of characters that were Ghostface Killers, he's just less memorable. He had less of a dynamic performance, less iconic moments in the overall thing, you know? Him trying to repeat the whole Stu line of get it up and all that stuff. It just felt a little bit too forced, and that's not all of Charlie Walker's fault as a character. That's not entirely Kieran Culkin's fault, but it just generally just felt very cliche. Didn't really feel like it stood on its own, where his counterpart, Jill Roberts, definitely felt that way, which is why she is much higher on this list. But overall, I like the character, but definitely don't dislike the character, but I'm far away from loving this character, and he's definitely very, very, very forgettable compared to the other 10 characters on this list, honestly. So, gotta throw Charlie Walker in at number 11. But now it is time to get to the top 10, if you will, and definitely far from the most popular Ghostface Killer, that's for sure. Probably the most controversial, maybe the most hated, probably the most disliked, but for me, was at least interesting and played by an actor that made him a little more memorable, and you really just can't forget the one time they had the lone wolf, and I'm talking about, what's his name? Roman or whatever. Sydney's half brother. You know what I mean? And the whole plot twist with him being Sydney's brother and all that stuff, while a little bit far-fetched in the sense of certain things he was pulling off in the film and certain things that were going on, I did dig his performance, and I thought his overall motivation made a lot more sense to why someone would go to those lengths to do something, and the way that it tied into Sydney's mother and his mother, Maureen Prescott, a.k.a., I can't remember what the hell her original name was before she changed her name, but whatever. But the whole thing with Maureen Prescott's character, of the way that she was out there, unfaithful to her husband, you know, a little bit, you know, very a very free spirit, if you will, sexually, and was very much out there, and that all very much ties into the character overall, the way they establish it in the franchise. So that motivation for Roman Bridger's character and why he did this whole thing and why he orchestrated this whole ordeal to begin with, and him being the director of the film Stab, him wanting to get to that point, him getting that job, him getting into filmmaking potentially just to do this someday after the movies had taken off, or giving him an obsession of horror films due to the whole thing that he was planning in the beginning, the whole way that he got the whole ball rolling with Billy and Stu and whatnot, not necessarily directly telling them to do it, but somewhat inadvertently inspiring them to do it, and everything kind of playing out the way it did throughout the rest of the franchise up until that point in the trilogy, to me, made some logical sense, but I think they just stretched certain things that he was able to pull off in Scream 3 itself. And overall, I would say that he wasn't necessarily the coolest Ghostface of all time, but he definitely had some really cool standout moments as well. Like the whole thing with Sydney and him, like just pretty much going at it, and her calling him a whiny little bitch essentially, and saying like, "Oh, boo hoo, who gives a shit about you," and all this stuff. I grew up without a mother. I had to go through things too. What makes you so fucking special? You know what I'm saying? And it ain't even my fault. So fuck you, dude. She did this whole thing before I was even born. It's not my fault she didn't want to take care of you. Get over yourself, And I like that whole dynamic with him and Sydney, and the whole brawl that goes down between him and Sydney. Excuse me. In the third act, I thought was just so well done and very, very, not intense was necessarily, but felt intense to me at the time as a kid when I was watching it, and it's still somewhat intense. But we definitely had some crazier third acts before between the original Scream 2 and Scream 6, respectively. So I think we've had some higher heights in the overall third act department in the franchise, but this was a fun third act. I thought he was a pretty decent Ghostface killer, so I'm gonna throw in Roman at number 10. Now it's time to roll into number 9, and that is going to be one of the latest killers themselves, and I'm talking about Richie Kirsch's dad, Detective Bailey, played by the great Dermot Mulroney. And overall, I thought this character was a solid, fairly decent performance, you know what I mean? I think this is where we start getting into some of the better ghost faces, because Dermot Mulroney is a very solid actor, a very capable actor, been around for quite a long time, really enjoyed his role he had on Shameless, and has enjoyed some of his other work in the past. So it was a very pleasant surprise to see him getting cast into the Scream franchise, kind of taking a little bit of the surrogate Dewey role as we so thought at the beginning of the marketing the previous year, back in 2022, after they announced the release coming of Scream 3 this year in 2023, and the whole speculation that went into that once they started announcing characters and images and all that good jazz. We all suspected he was going to take that surrogate Dewey role and step into play and play in with Kirby and kind of help her out with the investigation, a little bit of that Seven, good cop, bad cop type shit, you know what I mean? But that wasn't the way that it went down. No Mark Kincaid vibes, none of that. Detective Bailey is his own beast. And Dermot Mulroney... Sorry, my bad. Here we go. Dermot Mulroney's character, I thought, had a really, really fun moments in the third act when he kind of had the whole kill reveal and the way that he started playing up the more over-the-top nature of the character. I thought he pulled off very, very well. I know for some people it might have been a little too over the top, but for me personally, it definitely really, really worked. On my second watch, a little bit more than my first watch because I did see it twice, and overall, I really dug his performance. And at first, I didn't necessarily suspect him right off the bat, but as the film progressed, especially on my rewatch, I did start to pick up on some more hints, especially when Quinn was so-called killed. That I didn't catch up on because we didn't really see the body die on screen, but there are off-screen deaths that do go down even in the Scream franchise, so who knew? They kind of swerved me there, but the whole way that he was crying and all that stuff when he was taken off the case and everything like that. All the information just seemed a little too convenient at the time, and he also just didn't seem genuine when he was crying. To me, it just definitely seemed a little obvious that he was faking it. Maybe it's just me, but it seemed a little obvious at that point, so I started suspecting him, no doubts, all the way through the rest of the movie, and I turned out to be accurate. But I thought it might have been him and Kirby on the down low or something like that. Didn't suspect him for the reasons that it came to be, for him being Richie's dad and wanting to get revenge, a la Debbie Saul, a.k.a. Nancy Loomis style from Scream 2. So the whole way that they played in those Scream 2 elements in Scream 6 works well enough. We've been there, we've done that, we all know the deal. But overall, he's definitely a little more memorable than some of these other characters that I mentioned previously in the list, especially the last 12 and 11, of course. But overall, I just couldn't put him too high, but didn't want to put him too low anyway, so that's why he kind of ends up in the lower tier at number 9. So that's where we're going to put Detective Bailey. Now it's time to get into the character of Quinn. That's right, number 8, Quinn, Detective Bailey's daughter. That's right, we're talking about her, Liana Liberato's character. And I thought her performance was a little bit stronger than these guys overall. And the whole thing with her getting hit in the face with a brick and losing her teeth and all that shit, and the way that she played up the more kind of psychotic side of the character, I bought into a little bit more. And there wasn't much to the character, not a lot of substance there, with her just being kind of the slutty roommate essentially. And that's literally the way they put it out there in the film, not my way of putting it out there. But that's literally all she was doing, was just banging people and occasionally talking to the characters here and there. Wasn't much to the character. That's why I didn't want to put her too high, but I did really enjoy her performance in the third act much more than the other two killers, that being Detective Bailey and Ethan Landry, her brother and father, respectively. And although I still like Jack Quaid's performance as Richie out of everyone in this so-called family so far in these last two installments, I definitely thought Quinn was at the second strongest performance in there, at least in my opinion. And although she did some acts like in the Gale scene and things like that that don't seem very believable, and it pretty much had to be her in the suit at the time, and I don't necessarily buy that she did that, like throwing Gale's boyfriend like halfway across the room and shit. I don't necessarily buy that. It'll look like Quinn's in there doing freaking, a a 250 pound, fucking, bench press or some shit. Doesn't look like Homegirl's doing that. So overall, I can get past it. I enjoyed her performance a lot more than a lot of these other characters on the list here so far. So that's why I had to throw in Quinn at number 8. A little short and sweet, but hey, is what it is. But now it's time to get into one of my personal favorites of the franchise. And if it wasn't for some of these other characters being so damn well done, she definitely would have been in the top 5. And I'm talking about Amber Freeman. That's right, played by the great Mikey Madison. Some of y'all might recognize her from the great Quentin Tarantino film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And once again, not once again, but I want to throw this out there. Happy birthday to the great Quentin Tarantino on the day of this recording, y'all. Happy birthday to the legend himself. Cast her in that movie. You get a little bit of the same vibes with her performance in Scream 5. But I really, really dug this character overall. Now, one thing I will say for sure, this character was definitely the most obvious killer, potentially, of the franchise. She essentially laid out her motivation in almost the first or second scene of dialogue she had in the entire thing. I knew from Jump Street that Amber Freeman was in on it with somebody in some shape or form. Now, other than the Dewey kill being a little bit unbelievable with her having to be the one in the suit at the time, with the way things kind of lined up with the way the plot and the story went along. And if you're thinking about it in those terms of the story, not necessarily it being a stuntman as it really is in real life, that becomes a little bit of an issue for me. But besides all that, loved Mikey Madison's performance as this character in the third act. The way that she just totally swerved everybody and was just like, welcome to Act 3, bitches, and shoots Homegirl in the face. The way that she fakes herself being in trouble, and then Sydney and Gale are like, oh, fake, and she's like, oh, fuck this shit. Shoots freaking Gale right there, dude. Like, I just loved her performance, man. She really just took control and took command of the role and really hit her own vibe. It was reminiscent of her performance in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but still, for people that haven't seen that movie or the uninitiated, as they say, they won't pick up on any of that stuff at all. I'm just a big Tarantino nut, so of course I'm going to pick up on it. But most people are not going to pick up on that fact whatsoever. So it's really not a big deal. I really don't think y'all need to stress about that one. I really, really don't. I truly think that you could really enjoy the hell out of that and not have a problem with it. I loved her performance. She is one of the most memorable ghost faces out there, for sure, for me, just on the performance alone. And through the first half of the movie, she was okay. I don't necessarily think she was running away with the scenes, but she was definitely really delivering when she needed to and definitely was playing her part well. And while I suspected her the whole time, she didn't make it super obvious in her performance too much. It was more so that that exchange they had at the bar when they were playing pool, where she's like, oh, well, fuck Sam because she left him, ghost them all. You could just tell she had that disdain for her from Jump Street, you know what I'm saying? So very, very obvious that she was the killer, but didn't necessarily ruin it for me. I just really dug her performance and really liked the character, so got to throw in Amber Freeman at number 7. And as now we're getting close to that top 5, and let's get right into it with number 6. I'm talking about Richie Kirsch, man. Richie Kirsch. Definitely enjoyed the hell out of Jack Quaid's character in this thing. I really loved his performance throughout the entire film, whether he was, playing it down as the good guy, as the concerned boyfriend, or as the insane psycho killer in the third act, of course. I just loved every single step of the way with Jack Quaid's character. He's definitely one of my favorite up-and-coming actors right now, and I really, really love the vibe that he was bringing to it. I thought that the whole way that he did the monologuing, I thought felt a little bit fresh. Didn't feel like he was trying to repeat the same thing from Stu Macher and Billy Loomis. And while it's comedic, while it's a little over the top, I thought it fit the franchise, fit what they were going for. And I thought when he needed to be more serious in the first half of the movie as a straight man, as a concerned boyfriend, I thought he was doing a very good job. And I just really, really love his charisma and his presence on screen. So I just really dug the character overall. And especially in that third act, man, he's just chewing up the scenery, having a great time. And the whole thing with, oh, you're going to ruin my ending. What about my ending? When Sam's just straight up fucking him up and she's all, here's your ending. And just slits his throat, man. He just sells it so good, man. I really, really dug Jack Quaid's performance in the film overall, and the whole thing with the toxic fandom and that being the motivation with him and both Amber Freeman. I thought was a very, very witty way of bringing the Scream franchise into today. And I could see some crazy people out there doing something like this. Honestly, man, like people have taken their fandom, even for Scream in real life, too far. And for those that don't know, go check that out. Go check out the article. Scream was actually inspired by true events. It was somewhat inspired by true events in a certain sense, and then inspired a whole crazy killing unto itself, inspired by the film, and vice versa. Movie doesn't make psychos, it just makes them more creative. Y'all know the deal. So crazy shit, right? Crazy shit, man. But yeah, gotta love me some Richie Kirsch. Number 6. That's where we're gonna put him. That's where we're gonna do. Now it's time to get to that top 5, baby. Top 5. It's time for me to start talking about one of the killers from my favorite sequels, still to this day, of the Scream franchise. Scream 2, Nancy Loomis, Miss Loomis, Debbie Salt. You know the deal. Laurie Metcalf, she just absolutely killed it as this character, man. Her performance was so damn good in the third act. I just love the way that she was able to play up the Pamela Voorhees psycho mom doing this for her son. She just played it off so fucking well, man. And the way that she was just able to play psycho killer was just so damn grounded yet over the top in the best way, and just perfectly balanced throughout that entire third act sequence, the whole entire killer reveal and monologue and whatnot. And she really handled the action and the fighting and all that stuff really well also. And I haven't really seen Laurie Metcalf do anything like this outside of that movie. But I thought she did a phenomenal job, man, and I wish she would have did more horror films, or maybe I need to look back in her, dig more into her IMDb and see if she has, because she absolutely killed it as this character. And to me, for a long time, was one of the best Ghostface Killers by a landslide for a while, dude. Until some of these new installments came along, it really wasn't that hard to really put her in the ranking, man. And that's why still to this day, she's up there in that top 5 for me, man. I really dug Mrs. Loomis as a character, and the whole motivation makes sense. It is a little cliche. It is something we've done and been there and done that, but it was the first time in the Scream franchise they announced this lineage and this familial reason and ties and connections in this sort of way that now has been repeated a few times now, between Jill Roberts being Sidney's relative and Scream 6 with Detective Bailey, Quinn, and Ethan all being related to Richie, and all of that tying in together as well. So, and one of the victims of Scream 5 being related to Stu. So it's crazy. They've done the familial bloodline thing quite a few times now. They're almost on their own Star Wars vibe with it at this point. But so yeah, they've definitely been doing that quite a bit. But overall, I really love Nancy Loomis's performance. I mean, Nancy Loomis as a character, for just what she brings to the franchise, for the way it builds out the world, for the way that it just ties in everything to the first film so well. It makes it a great companion, and you can really feel her energy and her actually being Billy Loomis's mom, the way Laurie Metcalf plays it. So the way it was written, the way it was played, the way it was put together on screen, it just came together perfectly. And that's why Nancy Loomis, a.k.a. Debbie Salt, is always going to be personally in my top 5. And she is right now of my Ghostface ranking. Let's get into number 4, y'all. And I got to get into my guy, man, the accomplice. And I'm talking about none other than the legend himself, Mickey Altieri, played by the great Timothy Olyphant, the other killer of Scream 2, y'all. Loved his performance in there. He took what Stu Macher did with Matthew Lillard's performance and just dialed it up to 12 and just went absolutely bananas, and I love it. I love it to death, and I thought he did such a great job with it, and I was just having a blast. And the one thing that I absolutely love with the character is the way that he just played it so cool in the first half. You know, they almost didn't even show him enough at a certain point, but that's a discussion for another day. It has nothing to do with his ranking too much, really. But the way that he was just able to deliver such a really fun, memorable performance in that third act, when he had not some great scenes in the first half and the first and second act of the movie, but overall was not in there nearly as much as most of the other characters in the film. So the way that he was able to put such a stamp on this franchise as Mickey Altieri with literally no more than maybe 15 minutes of screen time at most, I thought was very, very impressive for the time, and really shows just even back then how talented Timmy Olyphant is and was, and how and how he was just born to play these really dynamic characters, man. Like, he's just such a great character actor in and of his own right. And I think he should have been up there in the A-list by now, man. Like, he's played a great villain in the Die Hard franchise. Before that went to shit, you know. Timothy Olyphant is the shit, you know what I mean? He's running around with the Mandalorians and all that. Probably going to get some freaking, you know, nanotechnology droid shit to bring him back, you know what I mean? Going to come up in that Mando season 4. Might even pop up, who knows, but that's a discussion for another thing. But I just love me some Timothy Olyphant. Love me some Mickey Altieri. And the way that he was going around getting his little found footage on, didn't think it necessarily tied into the plot all that much, but it did make Mickey a little more interesting. And the whole thing with him blaming the movies and wanting to get caught. Mickey's a sick fuck who wants to get caught, you know? Like, I love the whole way that he does that, and the whole way of how it really doesn't make sense. It doesn't even line up. And the fact that freaking Nancy Loomis is like, well, fuck this guy, shoots him, kills him off, but then he gets one shot off on Gale. So I love the way that he just went down swinging. Love me some Mickey Altieri. That's why he had to jump in there at number 4. Now it's time to round out this top 3, y'all, and I'm talking about one of the best ghost faces in the franchise. One of my personal favorites. Didn't know what she was going to do with this role necessarily when she got it back in the day. Wasn't sure if she could pull it off, but now I know from then on to today, she is immensely talented. She can kill it. She could do these things, and this is what proved it to me the first time. Emma Roberts is Jill Roberts, one of the other killers of Scream 4, a.k.a. Sydney's cousin. I love Jill Roberts as a character, man. I didn't suspect her for a second the first time I saw Scream 4, and even on my rewatch, I didn't notice shit, man. Not too much, really. They did a really good job in that 4th film. I don't know how Kevin Williamson came up with this idea or the way they were able to structure it and really make it work, but she is one of the hardest ghost faces to guess. In my opinion, is the hardest ghost face killer to guess, is her. She definitely was the hardest suspect to really nail down because there was nothing really there that really tipped it off as being obvious, like in some of the similar ways that other Ghostface reveals have done in the past or later on down the line. I absolutely love her performance in that 3rd act when she goes cuckoo bananas and starts hurting herself, and the way that she's able to sell and commit for that scene as an actor is just phenomenal. She's just killing it, man. Emma Roberts putting on a fucking acting clinic in this film, and the way she's able to play the nuance of seeming like the girl next door but not taking no shit, but also having this deep disdain and jealousy for Nancy, but also being able to play it up and play the innocent role and be so crazy and but so cognitively sound and aware of what you're doing to manipulate the situation the way she needs it to, and how she can play up the innocence and play into the darkness at the same time, and sometimes flip it on its head even in the same scene, is so damn impressive. I love what Emma Roberts did with this character of Jill Roberts. I know her motivation of just wanting to be famous and having jealousy for Sid does not necessarily hit for some people as it does maybe for myself, but for me personally, I feel like it's very relevant to kids in the modern era, the way people can go viral, the way people can get famous off of doing nonsense and not really doing too much of anything the way it used to be in the past, where you really had to have talent, skill, connections, and all these things to really make it. That's not necessarily the case as much as it was or as definitively as it used to be in the past. It's all about going viral. It's all about who you know. It's all about if you can market and sell yourself, right? So the way that she was doing that and selling herself and manipulating the situation to go in her favor, to me, plays out very well into that sociopathic kind of nature, into way that people become desensitized from that sort of thing, chasing fame in the 21st century. So for me personally, Jill Roberts as a character, as a Ghostface killer, in and of itself, to me, was brilliance, works so well, is one of, if not the best Ghostface reveal, in the fact that it's so hard to guess in that way. It was the most creatively and well done Ghostface reveal we've had in a long, long time. Maybe ever in the franchise, other than the top 2. Y'all know the deal. You had to know these were going to be the top 2. But which one is going to be number 2? Which one's going to be 1? Really, it's 1A and B for me. But I got to put him in here at number 2. My bad, y'all, but I got to do it. Billy Loomis is going to come in at number 2. Y'all know I love me both of the killers of Scream 1 and Stu Macher and Billy Loomis. You know what I mean? Stu Macher, baby. Billy Loomis. But I got to put Billy Loomis in there at number 2 for this reason. I love Matthew Lillard to death, so I had to put in Skeet Ulrich, a.k.a. Billy Loomis, at number 2. But let's not get it twisted here. Billy Loomis is an excellent killer and one of the best killers in horror history. He is one of the best killers in Scream, obviously, and completely nailed it in Skeet Ulrich's performance is fucking legendary as this character. I love the work that he put in and what he did with it. I even got the pleasure of meeting both of these guys recently over the last couple years at different conventions and things of that nature, and they're so awesome and down to earth, so that even fuels my fandom even more. So they had to top this list, man. But just their performance of these guys alone in these scenes together with Stu in there, man, just bringing the comedy, chewing up the scenery. He was doing that all throughout the film and just completely did that in spades here in this freaking original Scream movie, man. And I love the performance and the dynamic they have together throughout the film, and especially in the third act, the way they just go completely psycho and just go off the handle is just so fucking awesome. Between all the great comedy and the great comedic bits and this crazy manic energy with Matthew Lillard's character, and then the overall unhinged, violent, loud, and intimidating nature of Billy Loomis comes through so strong in this scene, and the way that he's able to yell and flip it on a dime and sometimes play it cool and sometimes play it calm and sometimes has to go crazy and ape shit. I love the balance of it. I love the immaturity shown in Billy that way, and the way that everything pans out, and the whole way of his horror fandom taking it a step too far. It was so fresh at the time and never would have landed without the great performances of both Skeet Ulrich and Matthew Lillard as these characters. And these characters would have fell flat and been complete cliches and jokes if these guys were not able to deliver the work that they did for these characters, man. So I can't stress it enough. I love both of these characters. They're without a doubt the best Ghostface killer reveal we've ever had. The fact that there was 2 killers at the time, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, whenever you caught this movie, depending on your age, if you're between the age of 24 to 30-something, you were there, ready for it when it came out, or you caught it a few years later like me, right before Scream 3 came out, right around the time when it was on cable. You saw the original trilogy and fell in love with it at the time. You were out and saw the original film as a teenager or a young adult, rode with the franchise into the 2000s. Y2K hit, Y2J hit, Monday Night Raw. Everything was going down, and that was what it was all about, man. But these guys, freaking Stu Macher, Billy Loomis, coolest characters ever out there in horror. My personal favorite characters. Some of my personal favorite characters out there in film in general. I love what these characters represent in the franchise. Without a doubt, the best Ghostface reveals, best motivations. Stu's just crazy. Billy's got a score to settle with Sidney. It's great. It's awesome. Some of the best freaking most quotable lines in history. Like I always say, movies don't make psychos. Movies make psychos. More creative. You hit me with the phone, dick. Leave her alone. I'll be right back. And your mom is no Sharon Stone. Huh? It's freaking phenomenal. That is going to be my Ghostface ranking. All 13 Ghostfaces from my least to my most favorite. Drop your list down below. Top 3, top 5, the whole 13, the whole 9. I want to hear from y'all. Drop your comments down below the video. Click all the buttons. Share, subscribe, hashtag more cowbell. It really does help the show out immensely. We appreciate all your love and support. Let's keep this positive train rolling. Let's keep nerding out about Scream. We got one more video to get to y'all before the end of the month as we get into April and all the other dope goodness we got to come on the Phantom Frequency Network. So make sure you stay tuned. You don't sleep. Much love. And we'll catch you on the flip side, y'all. Peace.